Interesting.
But there was something very wrong with it. It was dragging itself slowly, pulling from the front legs, and I saw that the back half of it was flat, as though deflated somehow. I thought it must have been
like it got hit by a car or something.
Run over, but there was no blood or sign of crushing, nor did it seem to be in any actual pain. It just had a back half that flopped and twitched obscenely as it made its gradual way across the lighted pavement and out into the darkness.
That would be a little unnerving.
I just stood there and watched, transfixed by it, until it disappeared from view. Thinking about it now, I remember its head was turned at a strange angle, far further round than it should have been, although I might be getting confused.
It sounds like someone was using this rat and did some kind of weird experiments with it. Its head's on backwards and its back half of its body is like twitching around and not working right, and it's just dragging itself by its two front legs. Something ain't right. What's going on, everybody? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a lovely day wherever you're at and whenever you're watching this. We're going to be jumping into episode 17 here of the Magnus Archives. This one is titled The Boneturner's Tale. So sounds very ominous. Links, as always, will be down below in the description to the original, well, not the original, just the original video, but to the Magnus Archives playlist, the, excuse me, Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel, and to the Rusty Quill's website. So please do me a favor. If you've been enjoying the Magnus Archives as much as I have, and you haven't already, be sure to go over there, like the videos that you've been enjoying. Be sure to hit that sub button on their channel. Check out their website. Check out any kind of Patreon stuff they got going on. Check out any kind of YouTube membership stuff they got going on, if you would like to give them some extra love and support. If you'd like to do the same for my channel, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to my YouTube membership and benefits that I have to offer, so you can check those out. Amongst them would give you access to come and hang out and join our discussions that we have before, during, and after these reaction videos that I do live with my YouTube members. So that has any interest for you, like I said, check all that stuff out. But regardless, thank you guys for coming in, hanging out, and watching the video. I hope you do enjoy it. If you do, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. And yeah, thanks for just coming in, taking out the time out of your busy day to do so. We have playlists for other reactions, the SCP Foundation, Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Fantasy, Dark Souls, and a lot of other stuff. So if any of that has any interest for you, like I said, there's playlists for those, so you can check out other content on the channel if you would like. So with all the shameless plugs done, let's jump into this here. This is, again, Magnus Archives number 17, The Boneturner's Tale. Do it. Let's go.
Rusty Quill presents the Magnus Archives.
Indeed it does. I said before, the opening always hits different.
Episode 17, The Boneturner's Tale.
The Boneturner's Tale.
Statement of Sebastian Araya regarding a new acquisition at Chiswick Library. Original statement given June 10th, 19...
Interesting. So a new acquisition at the library. This is automatically making me think of the tale of is it Jared Key? I don't remember, but the guy who was getting the books and burning them, that also offed his mom. I think it was Jared Key, but I could be misremembering and thinking of a different name. So that's already coming to mind, but let's see where this goes.
1999. Audio recording Sebastian Araya regarding a new acquisition at Chiswick Library. Original statement given June 10th, 1999. Audio recording by Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. Statement begins. Books are amazing, aren't they? I mean, when you think about what they really are. People don't give the actuality of language the weight it deserves, I feel. Words are a way of taking your thoughts, the very makeup of yourself, and giving them to another. Putting your thoughts in the mind of someone else. They are not a perfect method, of course, as there's plenty of scope for mutation and corruption between your mind and that of the listener, but that doesn't change the essence of what language is. Spoken aloud, though, the thought dies quickly if not picked up. Simple vibrations that vanish almost as soon as they are created. Though if they find a host, then they can lodge there, proliferate, and maybe spread further. Still, it is not a reliable method in terms of a thought's endurance, as humans are fragile creatures and rarely last a century. A book, though, is another story. There are written texts that have outlived the civilizations that created them. Imagine thoughts hundreds, thousands of years old, preserved and ready to be taken again. Corrupted or translated perhaps by a culture that does not understand them, but still, ideas that have outlived by lifetimes the mind that first conceived them. Will the thoughts that first ran through Shakespeare's head ever stop being thought by someone, somewhere, and a book?
Interesting. This is a change that doesn't have anything to do with the Magnus Archives, but there was recently an episode of the SCP Foundation that we went through that this is reminding me of, that there's, written words in certain books or whatever can become, the word is escaping me at the moment, but cognitohazards. That's the word I was looking for. Like mimetic cognitohazards that can infect people with certain ideas and change their personalities and whatnot. So I don't know. That's just making me think of that, but it's interesting.
So dense with a mind's fossilized creations, is it any wonder they have been ascribed such power throughout the ages? Or that an old library with heavy tomes covering every wall seems to have such a weight to it, beyond the physical presence of the texts it holds? I used to work at Chiswick Library. I didn't have such ideas back then, though. I just knew I loved books, always had. And so when the opportunity arose to work in my local library, I jumped at the chance. I had been a voracious reader ever since I was old enough to hold a book for myself, and even before that, my mother tells me I would pester her constantly to read to me. I suppose you might say my mind has always been receptive to the thoughts that lurk in the written page. Still, Chiswick Library is a long way from the cramped and austere libraries you're probably imagining. It's light and airy, with bookshelves and carpets that speak more of cash-strapped local councils than of the rich majesty of knowledge. It has an extensive children's section, and the vast majority of its stock are dog-eared paperbacks of true crime, literary fiction, and reference books. It has a modest collection of books on tape, and the atmosphere, though quiet, is far from oppressive. In a word, I would sum the place up as unthreatening. It was 3 years ago when this happened.
I don't know, I've never really been to a library and or bookstore that made me feel threatened. So I guess,
I had already been working there for about a year when the book first turned up. Now, we used to buy all of our books new, and I never did any of the acquisitions for the library, so I couldn't say when or where it might have been bought from. But it looked old and pretty beaten up when I first noticed it. It was handed back with 4 other books at the front desk, and as I was scanning them through, I noticed that one of the barcodes didn't seem to match up. The barcode and ISBN both registered as being that of Train Spotting by Irvin Welsh, but the book itself was an almost featureless black paperback, with a title on the front in faded white serif font, The Boneturner's Tale.
we're getting some static there. I also like how it's interesting how he knows the actual type of font. White serif font, like I couldn't, if I looked at some kind of font on a book, I couldn't tell you the name of it, but this guy apparently knows.
The book itself was an almost featureless black paperback, with a title on the front in faded white serif font, The Boneturner's Tale. I was a bit confused and called the librarian, Ruth Weaver, over to ask about it. She didn't recall seeing it ever before, but stuck in the front was the ex libris bookplate of Chiswick Library, as well as a lending label with a handful of stamps going back several years. Ruth shrugged and told me not to worry too much about it. We'd get it recorded and put on the system properly. But something about the situation bothered me, so I decided to check the record of the man who had returned it. His name, at least according to his library card, was Michael Crew. And sure enough, 3 weeks ago he had borrowed 4 books from us, specifically the 4 others he had returned. I suggested to Ruth that perhaps he was a self-published author who was trying to trick
Wonder what the other books are. I wonder if they're going to say or not.
his way onto our shelves, and she laughed, saying it was probably it. Although why anyone would go to the trouble of faking it just to get on the shelves of Chiswick Library was beyond her. The book...
Yeah, isn't this the episode that I was talking about with the book, with Jared Keith and burning the books? And didn't he find that one? I think that's what I'm thinking of.
Looked worn, though, like it had seen decades of being read, with a line creased down the spine and one half of the cover faded from the sun. Nor, from what I could see, did it list any author at all. It was at that moment that Jared Hopworth came in, and I had to put the book to one side.
Jared Hopworth?
Jared and I had once been fast friends, growing up on the same road, attending the same schools. We had spent much of our early life as inseparable. But he had always been, well, not to put too fine a point on it, thick as mud. And when I went away to university, he stayed behind. I think he saw it as something of a betrayal. And when I finally returned, I knew immediately something had changed between us. He spent the time I was away becoming a bit of a crook, and upon my return began what would eventually become a campaign of petty terror. He was always very careful to stop before he did anything that might get the police involved, and I guess there was enough leftover affection from a childhood spent together that I never really thought about reporting him. It was... hello, Elias?
Do you have a moment?
Not really. I'm sort of in the middle of something.
I understand. It's just that Miss Hearn has lodged a complaint.
A complaint? I could just as easily complain about her wasting my time.
That's not how it works, Jonathan.
I wouldn't have...
Huh. Miss Hearn. I'm trying to think if that name is ringing a bell or not. That's not the woman who we actually heard her give the statement in the Alone episode, is it? I can't remember her name right now. This is interesting how we're getting some kind of weird little break here, and someone has filed a complaint against John. Interesting. That's what I thought. I thought it was her from the Alone episode. Okay, so that makes sense. Naomi Hearn, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Who's the one who brought the Vertigo book? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, let's rewind this a minute here.
Hello, Elias?
Do you have a moment?
Elias.
Not really. I'm sort of in the middle of something.
I understand. It's just that Miss Hearn has lodged a complaint.
A complaint? I could just as easily complain about her wasting my time.
That's not how it works, Jonathan.
I wouldn't have even needed to do the recording if Rosie had kept her equipment in better condition.
Regardless, I would prefer that you not antagonize anyone connected to the Lucas family. They are patrons of the Institute after all.
Ooh, that's some information right there. They're patrons of the Magnus Institute. The Lucas family has ties. Interesting. That's an interesting little tidbit of information there. A little behind the scenes lore. Okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down, brother.
Fine. I'll be more lovely.
Right.
Now, can I get back to work?
Very well. By the way, have you seen Martin?
Oh, he's off sick this week. Stomach problems, I think. Blessed relief, if you ask me. Statement resumes. It was worst when Jared visited the library, because that inevitably meant that he was bored enough to seek me out for harassment. Sure enough, he started chatting with me, meaningless jibes that served to wait it out until Ruth, who didn't know about Jared's problems with me, returned to her office and closed the door. As soon as she had done so, he turned and in a single movement tipped over the metal returns cart, spilling the recently received books all over the floor. He smiled at me and apologized. I did my best not to show any irritation or indeed any reaction at all as I slowly walked around and bent down to start collecting them. As I rose to my feet, I felt an impact on the back of my head and staggered. Behind me, Jared stood holding the book I had put aside, the Boneturner's Tale, and had apparently picked it up to hit me with. But rather than offering me a fake apology or further violence, instead his eyes were locked on the book. We stood there in silence for a few seconds until he said something about needing something new to read, turned around and walked off.
Interesting.
I will admit, a bit unsettled. As far as I could...
That would be very strange, right? Like, it's almost like, you know, he'd mentioned that Jared was kind of like a crook, somewhat, maybe a minor criminal element in their, you know, little circle. He doesn't really do anything to really like get the police to like actively be looking for him, but he definitely seems like he might be in some shady circles. And so now all of a sudden he picks up this book and is like almost kind of hypnotized by it and gets the urge to need to read it. Right, exactly. Right. Interesting.
I had never seen Jared read, well, anything, really. And the look in his eyes when he had left had something in it not entirely unlike fear. Still, it was a welcome relief to have him gone, and I quickly tidied up the rest of the books before Ruth noticed anything amiss. There was nothing else I recall that happened that day at the library, but on the way home afterwards I passed by Jared's house. I had moved back in with my parents while I got everything sorted out after university, and he had never moved out of his childhood home, so we still lived on the same street.
Interesting.
It was late September at this point, so by the time I had walked back from the library it was dark, and I noticed a small shape moving in the pool of orange light below the street lamp. As I got closer, I realized with a slight start that it was a rat, and not a dirty, wild rat, but a large, white one, quite well kept and clearly once a pet.
Interesting.
But there was something very wrong with it. It was dragging itself slowly, pulling from the front legs, and I saw that the back half of it was flat, as though deflated somehow. I thought it must have
Like
been
he got hit by a car or something.
run over, but there was no
Right.
blood or sign of crushing, nor did it seem to be in any actual pain. It just had a back half that flopped and twitched obscenely as it made its gradual way across the lighted pavement and out into the darkness.
That would be a little unnerving.
I just stood there and watched, transfixed by it, until it disappeared from view. Thinking about it now, I remember its head was turned at a strange angle, far further round than it should have been, although I might be getting confused.
It sounds like someone was using this rat and did some kind of weird experiments with it. Its head's on backwards and its back half of its body is like twitching around and not working right, and it's just dragging itself by its two front legs. Something ain't right.
Many of these experiences run together when I look back on them. There was no light on in Jared's house, but I hurried.
I wonder, you know, I forget what episode it was, but the episode where the garbage men kept finding like the teeth, like the teeth in the trash bags. I wonder if somehow this is related to that. That's what's kind of coming to mind at the moment.
Home quickly after that. I didn't see Jared again for some time. At first I was just happy for the space, and as the days turned into weeks I started to feel something I wouldn't have expected to. Worry. If it hadn't been for the way he had left last time, it probably wouldn't have bothered me, but he had looked so strange. And even without him coming to the library, it was rare I would go a week without seeing him. By now it had been almost a month. Still, I resisted the urge to go to his house and check. If it turned out he was fine, then I'd be inviting a whole world of unpleasantness. And besides that, I reminded myself, he wasn't my problem anymore. It was late October when Jared's mother came in. It was near the end of the day, and outside was already dark.
It's been a month.
I was putting up a display about good Halloween reads before heading home, when I heard the door open. I turned around and there she was. It took me a few seconds to recognize her, if I'm honest. I hadn't seen much of her in the years since Jared and I had been close, and she had aged noticeably. Mrs. Hopworth wore a bulky overcoat, though it wasn't that cold yet, and her arm hung down in a sling. Something about the angle of the arm and how it hung there seemed faintly abnormal.
Definitely some strange things. Like Jared got a hold of this book, and maybe there's some kind of rituals in this book that allow them to alter the bone structure of creatures without necessarily killing them. And so he like experimented on the rat, then moved to his mom. Interesting.
I wondered if she had broken it. When I asked Mrs. Hopworth if she was okay, she just stared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. With her good arm, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small black paperback. She threw it on the floor without saying a word and turned to leave.
And it's the book.
I couldn't help myself. I asked her if Jared was all right. She spun back and started to swear violently at me. Told me I had no business with her son and that I and my books were to stay away from him.
Interesting.
As she spoke, I couldn't look away from her arm, and the odd ways it twisted as she gestured, how her fingers seemed to bend the wrong way.
This is also kind of reminding me a little bit of episode 3, maybe, with Graham, I think, right? The woman who was like watching him from across the street, and the like patterns she kind of saw when she was staring at the table. This is kind of reminding me of that a little bit as well. There's something going on related with that. Maybe something with this book is like reforming the shapes of people's like bone structure in a certain weird patterns or something. I don't know.
I was glad that Ruth had gone home early, as I didn't want her to witness the disturbing confrontation I had now apparently caused. When she had finished, Mrs. Hopworth spat towards me.
Jesus.
So I noticed she was careful to avoid spitting at the book that now lay on the floor between us, and left. I put down the copy of Stephen King's Misery that I now realized I'd been clutching, and approached the discarded volume.
That's kind of appropriate, right? He's reading Misery. That's a little interesting reference.
That lay on the carpet. The battered black cover seemed the same as when I had first seen it weeks ago, with that faded white title on the front. The Boneturner's Tale. I reached down to pick it up.
Some static
Before
again.
I did so, a thought flashed across my mind, a memory of the last time I had seen Jared, and I grabbed some tissues from the desk before using them to pick up the book. Even then, I felt my skin crawl as I held it. I decided not to deal with it that night. I wasn't entirely sure that reading it in the daytime would be that much better, but the shadows cast from outside seemed to have gotten that much starker since the book had been brought back into my library, and it scared me. I placed it in the book returns cart and left, double-checking I had firmly locked the door behind me. It rained heavily that night. My room is in a converted attic, and when the weather is bad, it's as if I can hear every raindrop against the window that is just above my bed. It wasn't a storm. There wasn't the wind for it. It was just that heavy, pounding rain that drummed and beat on the glass above me. I couldn't sleep. There was a nagging apprehension in my mind, something that, after 3 hours lying in bed, had turned into almost a panic. How could I have just left the book? There was something wrong with it, that much was obvious. What if Ruth came in earlier than I did tomorrow and took it? What would happen to her? Should I have destroyed it? That last thought was quickly pushed away. I wasn't sure I had it in me to destroy a book, even one with such a strangeness to it. It surprised me just how easily I accepted that the Boneturner's Tale had dark powers, but I suppose I've always felt that books have a sort of magic to them, so it was really just a confirmation of what I had suspected deep down for a long time. It was 2 a.m. when I decided that I couldn't just leave it there overnight. I got up, dressed, and quietly headed out into the rain towards the library, making sure to take my gloves. My coat was supposed to be water resistant, but still managed to soak in the 20 minutes it took me to walk there. I had the key from locking up that night and deactivated the alarm as I entered. It was almost pitch black inside, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. but I turned on as many of the lights as I could without it being immediately obvious outside the building. It wasn't many, and I still had to half feel my way through the foyer and into the library proper. As I approached the desk, the book returns cart where I had left the Boneturner's tale, I began to step less cautiously. It was darker in that corner of the library, and I put a hand out to steady myself against the handle of the small metal cart. I'd taken my gloves off at that point, and my hand came away wet. I quickly fumbled for the torch
When he was in
I'd
the rain.
snatched before heading out and turned it on. Red dripped.
Okay, yep, static here, and the wetness is not rain but blood.
And pulsed from the cart, soaking the pages and forming a small pool around it. The books were bleeding.
Books,
I
plural?
laughed at that.
And you laughed at that? Okay.
It seemed so appropriate somehow, so utterly correct that those neighboring books should suffer, should be contaminated by it. Just as it seemed right and proper that when my torch found the Boneturner's tale, it was dry, unmarked by the gory scene around it. I put my gloves back on and carefully took out that sinister volume and placed it on the desk. Perhaps I should have fought harder against the temptation to look inside, but my curiosity was too strong. Thick gloves made turning individual pages almost impossible, and I still had enough good sense to keep them on. So I just opened it on a few random pages and started reading. Perhaps I was being paranoid. After all, I touched the book with my bare hands when it was first given into the library.
True.
And had no problems.
True.
But the image of Jared's mother wouldn't leave my head. How her arm had twisted when it moved. I decided to keep the gloves on. It was written in prose, and certainly seemed to be a story of some kind. The part I read dealt with an unnamed man, at various points referred to as the Boneturner, the Bonesmith, or just the Turner, watching an assembled group of people as they made their way.
Wasn't there a character in a previous episode whose name was Turner? I could just be making that up, though. I'm thinking about some other form of media. The name Turner is definitely familiar, and there have been characters named Turner in other movies or stories, but for some reason I feel like there was another character with the name Turner in a previous episode.
Which named man, at various points referred to as the Boneturner, the Bonesmith, or just the Turner, watching an assembled group of people as they made their way into a small village. It's unclear from what I read whether he is traveling with them or simply following them, but I remember being unsettled by the details he observed in them. The way the parson would move his hand over his mouth whenever he stared too long at the nuns, or how the cook looked at the meat he prepared with the same eyes that looked at the pardoner. It was only at that point that I realized the book was describing the pilgrims from the Canterbury Tales.
It might have been, yeah.
Now, this certainly wasn't some lost section of a Chaucer classic. It was written in modern English, with none of the archaic spelling or pronunciation of the original. Besides that, the writing itself was of questionable quality. There was something compelling about it, though. The debate about how finished the Canterbury Tales were, well, it's a very real debate. In the prologue, over 100 tales are promised, but the most complete surviving version doesn't even reach 24.
Interesting.
The book just sort of ends, with Chaucer adding a short epilogue imploring God for forgiveness.
Interesting. So this is basically implying, right, that potentially a lot of these other tales, like they may have that been, 100 tales, but some of them may have been cursed in some kind of way, and so they've been stricken from like written history. That's kind of a fascinating idea.
A plea that is generally read as sarcastic or rhetorical. I flicked ahead a few pages and found the bonesmith had apparently crept up to the miller while he slept. It described him silently reaching inside him, and it's a bit hazy. All I remember clearly is the line, "And from his rib a flute to play that merry tune of marrow took, And as for the rest, I don't recall in detail.
Static building up.
But I know that I almost threw up, and that the miller did not survive. This was on page 16, and it was a thick book. I turned to the frontispiece, desperately curious as to how this book had ended up in our library. In the harsh light of the torch, I could see the creases and peeling edges of the Chiswick Library label, which usually meant it had been removed and restuck, or taken from another book entirely. I could even see the edges of another label underneath. Using a pair of scissors, I carefully peeled off the top one, but was disappointed. It was the label for another library, probably the last place it had been left, although I think it must have been in Scandinavia, because it was something like the library of Jurgensburg, or Jurgen Light, or Jurgerlicht, or something like that.
I mean, it might not be a reference to it, but something light, flameless light or whatever. The reference from the Lost John's Cave that's coming to mind.
Didn't help me.
Or not the that's the one from the hospital, is what I meant, not Lost John's Cave.
I was all
Leitner,
set to
yeah.
return to reading the thing when I heard the sound of breaking glass behind me. I turned around to see Jared Hopworth standing in front of the shattered window. Or at least, I assume it was Jared, as it demanded the book from me in Jared's voice.
And Leitner is the author of some of these other books, right? Like the previous book that he had gone after and like burned, right? Am I mistaken with that?
Breaking glass behind me. I turned around to see Jared Hopworth standing in front of the shattered window. Or at least, I assume it was Jared, as it demanded the book from me in Jared's voice, but wore loose-fitting trousers and a thick coat with a hood that almost completely covered his face.
It demanded the book from me in Jared's voice. That is a very interesting statement.
Or its face. He was longer than Jared had been, and stood at a strange angle as though his legs were too stiff to use. When he gestured for the book, I saw that his fingers looked sharp, as though the skin at the ends were being pushed into a tight point by something inside. I told him that the library was closed, because at that moment I could think of nothing else to say.
Hey man, library's closed, you gotta move on. Damn it. Come back tomorrow. I'm sure that's exactly what's gonna happen right now.
He ignored me and demanded again that I give him the book. That was when I did something a little rash, which is to say I punched him. I had never really thrown a punch in anger before, or even desperation, so it came as quite a shock to me when I managed to drive a single solid fist into his solar plexus. But as I did this, and this is the part that still gives me nightmares, I felt his flesh give way, almost retract, drawing me in close. And then I felt his ribs shift, shut tight around my hand as though his rib cage were trying to bite me. They were sharper than I would have thought possible. And at last, this was what actually started me screaming. Never before or since have I ever screamed like that, and I'm still a bit surprised I'm capable of making such a noise, but there you have it. In my panic, I dropped the copy of the Boneturner's Tale, and in less than a second, Jared was on it. He released my hand and grabbed it with a frantic desperation before he turned to run back out the way he came in. I started to chase after him until I saw how he was moving, how many limbs he had. He had added some extras. That was the moment it finally all got too much for me, and I stopped running. It wasn't my book. It wasn't my responsibility. And I had no idea what I was dealing with.
Probably a smart thing to just let it go at this point. You see like a mutated version of your friend who may not be his friend anymore, with more limbs than he should be, moving with supernatural speed and ability. Not to mention you punched him and his rib cage opened up and grabbed a hold of your hand. Definitely some weird stuff going on. Might not want to pursue it. Might just want to let that one go. Just saying, probably a smart move.
So I didn't. I just stood there in a daze and watched the thing that was once
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking we're getting into some John Carpenter's The Thing stuff going on here. Right? Very much so.
Jared disappear out into the rain. I never saw him again. The police turned up soon after. Someone had apparently heard my screams and called in a report.
I feel like, right, like, did he take, like, other appendages, like, from his mom, right? Did he, like, take her arms from other creatures and things like that, and, like, attached it to him? And then was able to, like, utilize and move them as he wanted to, hide them away, or I don't know. But yeah, the first thing that was coming to mind was like this very much sounds similar to like John Carpenter's The Thing, where he can almost like shift his body and form into other things.
I spun some tale about falling asleep at my desk and being woken up by an attempted robbery. God knows how I explained the bloody books, because it wasn't some disappearing phantom. It took weeks to get out.
That's also like interesting too, right? You know, what does that exactly symbolize and or mean? The fact that the book itself, the Boneturner's Tale, was clean and fine, but all the books surrounding it were bleeding, you know? Is it like corrupting the other books around it in some kind of way? Is it somehow making like other copies of itself into these books?
Everyone seemed to believe me, though, and miraculously I kept my job. I haven't seen Jared in the years since, and I haven't done any further research on the book. The best scenario I can possibly imagine is that this statement is the last I ever need to hear or speak about Jared Hopworth or the Boneturner's Tale.
More static.
Statement ends.
Statement ends.
Well, this makes me deeply unhappy. I've barely scratched the surface of the archives, and I've already uncovered evidence of 2 separate surviving books from Jurgen Leitner's library.
Yeah.
Until he mentioned that, I was tempted to dismiss much of it out of hand. But as it stands now, I believe every word. I've seen what Leitner's work can do, and this news, even 17 years out of date, is still very concerning to me. I'm going to have a discussion with Elias as to what we can do to address the issue. I know he'll just give me the old record and study, not interfere or contain speech again.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, right, if I were John, I'd be like, we need to start hunting down these books and do something with them. Destroy them, contain them, put them away somewhere, some kind of secret vault that the Magnus Archive has to keep these out of the hands of people that it could do harm to. You know what I'm saying?
But I at least need to make him aware of it. Tim and Sasha have cross-referenced the events here with police reports, and sure enough, there was a warrant issued for the arrest of Jared Hopworth for breaking and entering, as well as assault. He was never found, though, and the crimes weren't serious enough to keep the case active for very long. I've been doing as much research myself as possible, but the book seems to have vanished along with him. I asked Martin to try and hunt down Mr. Arakoya himself for a follow-up, but have been informed that he passed away in 2006. He was found lying dead.
Wait, who passed away?
Possible, but the book seems to have vanished along with him. I asked Martin to try and hunt down Mr. Arakoya himself for a follow-up, but have been informed that he passed away in 2006. He was found lying dead.
You know, it's interesting, a lot of people that come give their statements end up dying at some point.
Informed that he passed away in 2006. He was found lying dead in the middle of the road on the night of April 17th. Despite the fact that there was no crushing or trauma marks on the body, the inquest ruled it a hit-and-run car accident.
Yeah, he probably had the same kind of issues that he saw that rat have, right?
due to the mangled position in which he was found.
Yeah, it's very weird. Very weird. A lot of these statement givers just keep dying.
It was a closed casket funeral.
No.
Recording ends.
Interesting tale. Interesting tale.
The Magnus Archives is a podcast distributed by rustyquill.com and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike International License. Today's episode was written and performed by Jonathan Sims. It was produced by Alexander J. Newell and Murray Porter, and directed by Alexander J. Newell. To comment on episodes, make donations, and view links, images, videos, and show notes, visit rustyquill.com. Rate and review us on iTunes, visit us on Facebook, tweet us on Twitter @TheRustyQuill, or email us at mail@rustyquill.com. Thanks for listening.
Well, there we have it. Episode 17, The Boneturner's Tale by the Magnus Archives. Links, as always, will be down below in the description to the Magnus Archives playlist, the Rusty Quill Podcast YouTube channel, and to their website. So please do me a favor. If you've been enjoying this series as much as I have, and you haven't already, please go over to their YouTube channel. Make sure you like the videos that we've gone through that you've enjoyed. Hit that sub button on their channel. And check out their website, check out their Patreon, check out their YouTube membership stuff if they have any. You would like to take your support for their channel to the next level. You know, the stuff with this is the second tale where we've got a Leitner book in, and I think I mentioned it in the first one too. It very much for those of you who are familiar with the SCP Foundation, it has a very kind of Alagadin type feel to it. Stories of the Hanged King, and there's this like other dimension of very strange entities that can influence people in our world and kind of corrupt them and change them in certain ways. It has somewhat of a feel to that. It reminds me of that. But it's interesting that we actually kind of get we actually kind of see more of an actual creature in this one, right? Like so far, we've had like the anglerfish in the first episode, which you don't really see. It's just kind of like reference that it's a creature there potentially puppeting someone to get them to come in and then attack them. We don't really necessarily see the entity that got a hold of Graham. We don't necessarily see the entity in a father's love tale. In Lost John's Cave, we hear something, but we don't necessarily, get a description of anything really. Other than that, we've just had some like descriptions of like insects and fog and some stuff like that. But this is one of the ones where we actually kind of get more of an idea of what some of these creatures or entities could be. And it very much, like Alfie had mentioned here, felt very John Carpenter's The Thing-esque, where it was able to essentially kind of be in full control over all of its bodily parts. When he, went to hit him in the rib cage, it kind of gave away and then wrapped around his fist to hold him there. And he was able to create and utilize more appendages to move away. It's interesting that he didn't really attack him at that point though, right? I wonder why, or I wonder why that is, because he was desperate to get the book back, and he wasn't giving it to him, and then he attacked him. So it's interesting that the creature just basically like took it, held him there, and just really wanted the book and then left, but didn't do anything to him. So I wonder if there was still like some of his humanity left and didn't want to hurt him. Although if he had already been doing experiments on like his pet and potentially his mom, I don't know how like valid that would be. But it does strike me as kind of strange that they didn't just go ahead and attack him or do something to him there, or just kill him and take the book. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. He waited a long time before he actually did something to him. I find that's interesting. I find the SCP version of the King in Yellow to be pretty accurate, at least in its effects. But go too far in depth. Yeah, right. It seems very familiar to that stuff, for sure. For sure. Before we get episode 19 to 22 parts in one statement. Okay. So we'll have to do those ones together. But yeah, another great, interesting tale, furthering the lore of the Magnus Archives Institute. The big drop there, right, was that the Lucas family are essentially, you know, funding the Magnus Institute. So that is interesting. That was in this one, right? That wasn't in the previous episode. I think it was in this one. I think so. I'm getting them confused now. But yeah, that was an interesting little lore tidbit. So, and yeah, definitely, yeah, for sure. And it's also interesting that this is one that John couldn't really just kind of write off, you know? He couldn't just be like, yeah, this one, you know, because it has ties in with Leitner in another book. And he basically was like, at the end, like, yeah, we need to kind of, he wanted to more actively, it seems like he wanted to more actively, like, do something to get any of these books out of the hands of the public to prevent something further from happening. And it can't be a coincidence that two of these books have caused these supernatural incidents. And so I would probably be with him in that. I'd be like, yeah, we gotta, you know, actively search for these books and try to do something to, you know, contain and archive these. So, but yeah, it's interesting that the Lucas family has ties with the Magnus Institute. So I wonder how that will further develop down the line. But another great episode of the Magnus Archives. Again, this was number 17, the Boneturner's Tale. Like I said, links will be down below in the description if you want to go check out their stuff. Give them some support and some love. If you'd like to do the same for my channel, there is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have to offer. One of the benefits is you'd be able to come in and join us when I do these reactions live with my YouTube members. You can come in, hang out, and join our discussions that we have. So you can check that out if you have any interest in doing so. But yeah, otherwise, you know, thank you guys very much. If you're still watching here to the very end, I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate all the support. Thank you for coming and hanging out, taking the time of your day to check out the video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. We have playlists for the SCP Foundation, Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Fantasy, Dark Souls, all you know, all kinds of stuff like that for other reactions. So if any of that interests you, you can check all that stuff out. But for now, hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys on the next one.